Hello students, today I am doing a video from the subject education, and this area covers up what? Psychology and educational psychology. Now before going to the other areas of discussion, let me first of all clarify to you what is psychology. Now psychology means what? Psychology means that it originated from Greek word that is psyche, soul, and logos, study. Okay, psyche, soul, and logos means study. When we combine the two words together, it comes into a definition, and that is what? That psychology is a study of soul. Psychology is a study of soul. Now, this psychology is a study of soul definition has been rejected by the other psychologists or other political philosopher. Why? It was said that psychologically the soul cannot be studied because soul cannot be seen, soul cannot be observed, और soul cannot be touched. हम उसको छू नहीं सकते, हम उसको देख नहीं सकते. Because of their thing क्या होता है कि soul को हम perfectly scientifically study नहीं कर सकते. So we cannot study soul scientifically. So this definition is rejected. And then came the other definition, what it is? That psychology is a study of mind. Now, psychology is a study of mind. Again, it was rejected. On the basis of what? It was said that ki mind is mysterious and vague. We cannot study the mind, the inner part of the mind we cannot study. Okay, it is a mysterious type of mind. Human beings' mind are mysterious. So we cannot study perfectly the mind. So ultimately, this definition was also being rejected. And then came another definition. The other definition is that psychology is a study of consciousness. Now, see students, a mind carries up three parts. हमारा जो mind होता है वो three part में divide होता है. Consciousness, unconsciousness, and subconsciousness. So it was said here that we are aware only in our conscious part. The consciousness होता है only at that time we are aware, and that area only can be studied or covered up for study. So this definition is also rejected because the other part is not covered up, the subconscious part and unconscious part. And because of which this definition was also not taken into account. Okay, because only one part cannot be studied and cannot be made a perfect definition. So this three definition has been rejected, and then came the other definition, a more refined definition. Now what it is? It was said that psychology is a study of behavior by J.B. Watson. Now psychology is a study of behavior. See students, in our life, we do many types of activities. Okay, those activities are reflected through behavior. So behavior carries up with different types of activities. Like what? We go with an activities called motor activities or cognitive activities. Now, cognitive activities means like swimming, dancing, walking. That is known as cognitive activities. But then also other part is there. What? Behavior also covers up called cognitive activities. Now cognitive activities means which part? Like we go for reasoning, we go for thinking. Okay, हम thinking करते हैं, हम reasoning करते हैं, हम सोचते हैं बहुत सारा चीज को. That part is known as cognitive part. And then other part also covers up, that is affective activities. Now affective activities covers up like anger, then your fearness. Okay, these activities also known as affective activities. So it was again said that behavior covers up not only the overt behavior, okay, overt part of a human being, but also it covers up the inner portion, inner experience of a particular human being, and that is covert behavior. So behavior covers up the whole part, covert part also and overt part also. And because of that, this definition was taken into account, which is still now we can say that it is relevant. We are studying up this, that psychology is a study of behavior of human being. Another person called Crow and Crow, he has said psychology is a study of human behavior and human relationship. So again he has went up and focused on the study of behavior of human beings. So ultimately we can say that psychology is a study of behavior, because ultimately psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So whatever our activities that we do through our mind, okay, their things are reflected into our behavior. So psychology covers up that part. Psychology जो है उस part को पकड़ता है and उस part को reflect करता है, study करता है, and then बहुत सारा चीज निकल के आता है, judgment जो है उसमें से निकल के आता है. Because of that thing, psychology is now relevant with a definition called that psychology is a study of behavior. Okay. Now students, हम फिर दूसरे जगह पे जाएंगे. We will move forward to other area, that is what branches of psychology. After knowing the meaning of psychology, now we will go to the other area, that is the branches of psychology. Now what are the branches of psychology? What does the psychology studies with? It deals with what area? Okay, now what are the branches? Let's see. First of all, the branches are normal psychology. Now normal psychology, by the word normal we can understand that it means normal behavior. Okay, so here the study of behavior of normal person. So psychology is the study of behavior of a normal person. Okay, डे टू डे लाइफ में जो नॉर्मल लोग होते हैं, हम जो नॉर्मल लोग होते हैं, व्हाट आर द एक्टिविटीज वी आर डूइंग, व्हाट are the things we are adopting for, what are the studies we are going for, what are the jobs we are going for, different types of psychology, okay, in a normal position, in a normal way. So psychology is the study of normal behavior of a human being. Okay, एक हो गया. Next one is abnormal psychology. It means study of behavior of abnormal person. Now हम देखते हैं कि सोसाइटी बिलोंग्स विद डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ एबनॉर्मल पर्सन्स ऑल्सो. मेनी पीपल जो है ना, लोग इस दुनिया में बहुत सारे लोग नॉर्मल नहीं होते हैं. ओके, सो सम पीपल आर देयर हु आर एबनॉर्मल. सो साइकोलॉजी ऑल्सो स्टडीज अबाउट द एबनॉर्मल बिहेवियर ऑफ ए ह्यूमन बीइंग. द वे वी स्टडी द नॉर्मल बिहेवियर, इन द सेम वे वी ऑल्सो स्टडी द एबनॉर्मल बिहेवियर ऑफ द ह्यूमन beings. So psychology also deals with this abnormal behavior. Next one is now human psychology. It studies the behavior of human being. So normally abnormal ho ya normal ho, a human being, okay, we study the human being. So the study of human being जो होते हैं, psychology also deals with that, the whole of the human being activities. Okay. Next one, animal psychology. Study of animal behavior, experimental. Now what is this? I written down in a very short way because the board doesn't cover all. Now what is it that behaviors, बहुत टाइम क्या होते हैं, whenever psychological test is being conducted upon a person, first of all that test is being conducted on a animal. Okay, so the behavior of that particular with some medicine for medicinal purpose also, बहुत टाइम क्या होते हैं, मेडिसिनल कुछ मेडिसिन दे के कुछ एक बिहेवियर पैटर्न को समझा जाता है. ओके, ऑन द एनिमल. सो दैट टाइप ऑफ स्टडी आल्सो बीइंग डन. सो इसको हम बोलते हैं एनिमल साइकोलॉजी, द स्टडी ऑफ बिहेवियर ऑफ एनिमल व्हाइल गिविंग ए मेडिसिन टू दैट एनिमल. आफ्टर दैट हाउ डज द एनिमल बिहेव्स लाइक, ओके, दैट इज एक्सपेरिमेंटेड. बिकॉज मे बी बहुत टाइम ऐसा हम देखते हैं ना कि whatever things experimented on the animal are being also afterwards, if it becomes correct or exact position में बैठता है, the result becomes fruitful, then that thing, that medicine again forwarded and again modified and then given on the human being also. तो psychological test इस तरह से भी किया जाता है. Okay. Next one is genetic psychology, concerned with developmental stages of individual. Concerned with developmental stages of individual. Now, genetic means what? Genetically, right from infancy to our old age. Okay, the different variety of stages that we pass through. Okay, genetically that area also being psychologically studied. Now, बहुत टाइम होता है genetically genetic behavior एक चीज होता है. बहुत सारे जो suppose a child, okay, suppose a child is behavior in a specific way, particular way. So that behavior from where he got from his father, basically, okay, or from his grandfather, basically. So that type of study is known as genetic behavior or genetic psychological study. Okay. Next one is child psychology. This is very easy to understand. Study of child psychology. Now, child psychology, we understand about the child. Okay, how does the child behave, like what he is doing in his childhood stage. Okay, how does when he goes to school, first of all, suppose example, first of all he goes to school. While going to school on the first day he cries. Okay, many of the students or most of the students they cry because they are parted. They always think that they are parted from their parents, so they cry. So this is one psychology. So this type of different psychology we can study about a child. Next one, adolescent. Study of adolescent psychology. Now, adolescent is a period of storm, stress, anxiety. Okay, so much varietiness are there in an adolescent stage. So we study all these things in our psychological study. Adolescence area. Okay, what does adolescence area deals with? How does adolescent behave when he goes in that stage? Okay, so is he is behaving in an anger way mood? His behavior in a very depression mood? If his behavior is reflecting that love or very much distrust or socially active or morally active or religiously active, all these things we study in adolescent period also. Okay. Next, adult. Study of adult psychology. Now, adult psychology is again we study the adulthood. How does a person behave in his adulthood? So, psychology actually in infancy, in childhood, in adolescence, in adulthood, okay, old age, we study the psychology, variety of psychology of the variety of stages of the human being, their nature. Okay. Next, social psychology, study of behavior of individual in groups. Now, here, social means what? Society. Okay. So, how does a individual behavior reflects with the group, okay, with his group? क्योंकि हम जो सोसाइटी में रहते हैं वो सोसाइटी बहुत सारे लोगों से बना होता है. ओके, सो हाउ डज जब ए इंडिविजुअल पर्सन ही गोज आउट ऑफ हिज होम एंड ही स्टेप्स एंड ही मीट्स हिज अदर ग्रुप्स, ओके, हाउ डज द इंडिविजुअल बिहेव इन अ सोसाइटिकल मैनर, इन सोसाइटिकल वे? दैट टाइप ऑफ स्टडी इज नोन एज सोशल psychology. Next one is pure psychology. Psychologists study this branch for acquiring knowledge. Many a time we have seen that many of the psychologists, okay, हम इसको बोलते हैं psychologist. These psychologists they try to study the behavior of all this whatever things I have discussed almost now. That thing is studied by whom? Psychologists only. So this is also being applied or studied in psychological manner. That is known as pure psychology. Psychologists they apply their psychological behavior pattern into their study, and this is known as what? Pure psychology. Next one is educational psychology. With help of psychology, it solves educational problem. Okay, because our discussion of topic is educational psychology, to which we will step forward afterwards. Now, this is what educational problem. Now, many students, when they pass their childhood, then they go to adulthood, in adolescence, and then afterwards meet later adolescence period. That time in their studies they face many problems. So educational psychology means dealing with that problem. How does a child faces many problems in his different stage, and how does that educational area में हम इसको पढ़ते हैं? Okay, how does he faces that educational period, and how does his mind, his psychology is working at that time? That is what? Educational psychology. Next one is clinical psychology. studies psychological problem of people. So that is a bit reflected with the abnormal psychology. Clinical psychology में बहुत सारे होते हैं ना लोग जो mentally बहुत डिप्रेस्ड होते हैं, डिप्रेशन में चले जाते हैं, फिर बहुत सारे लोग जो डिस्ट्रैक्ट होते हैं, लोगों से नहीं मिलते, they try to prefer to live alone from the different people, quiet, shy. Okay, so इस तरह से बहुत सारे प्रॉब्लम भी फेस करते हैं बहुत सारे लोग. So this also we study. So this type of study is known as clinical psychology. So also we study this psychological problem of people, various psychological problem. So these are few of the branches that I have taken or covered up in my today's discussion of psychological study, that is branches of psychology. Okay. Students, now we are moving towards another area of our discussion, that is adolescent psychology. Now, before going to the discussion of adolescent psychology, first of all, let's understand what type of year is known as adolescent. So, in a particular person or in a child life, when the childhood went up and then he attains and enters into another area that is known as adolescent. So, the age between 13 to 19 years or between 12 to 20 years is known as adolescent stage. So he is not yet child and he is not child remained and not yet attaining adulthood, and that in between period is known as adolescent. So adolescent period is a very much risky period, very much adventurous life period, very much confusing period, conflicting things arises in his life at that time. So much development take place in his life, and because of that, the psychological study of adolescent is very much important. Okay, so what is adolescent psychology? Adolescent psychology means an unique mental health needs of adolescent. So unique mental health needs means what? At that time he began to go through different issues, critical issues, conflicts, so much development take place in his life, and because of that thing it is known as unique mental health needs of adolescent. Now we can again go through more, or we can have the knowledge of adolescent psychology more if we go through its developmental area. Okay. Now what are the developmental area of adolescent period? That is first of all physical development. Now physical development means what? The body structure, the development of his body, like the increase in size, weight, height, the structure of the boys suddenly it changes or develops more. The girls become more beautiful, the boys become taller and they begin to grow up their mustache and beard at that time. And like girls goes through the menstrual cycle that time, the boys goes through the problem of nocturnal emissions, and then there is a growth of pubic hair in different parts of the body, and then his bones, muscles, all this also becomes stronger at that time, and his brain also develops much at that time. This is the physical development of an adolescence period. And then comes the cognitive development or intelligence development or intellectual development. What can we say? At that time, he becomes much more interested in the surrounding areas, in the subjects, in many things. Okay. We can say at that time that the doctors, engineers, poet, writers, whoever becomes at the later stage, the interest of that thing develops in this stage only. Okay, this teenage life only at that time. So his interest becomes vibrant at that time, and he begins to go through logical thinking, and then abstract thinking also comes into his mind at that time. He goes through the question of what, when, where, how. Then his thinking also characterized by critical thinking also. He just doesn't goes with okay. He just wants to query up what is these things, why these things happen. His interest becomes much more at that time, and then he begins to follow up somebody. Hero worship becomes the motto of his life. He began particular somebody or some persons are followed by the adolescents at that time. Then their life also becomes with fantasy world. The girls goes through fairy tale world, and the boys are going through wandering life, adventurous life. Life is an action for them. So that type of interest develops, or that type of development actually goes through in the life of an adolescent at that stage. Next one is emotional development. Now, emotional development is like love, anger, okay, action, then depression, anxiety. Okay, emotionally they become attached to their peer groups and or maybe to the opposite sex. Okay, at the time then this sexual development take place. They are much more disturbed at that time with all these things also, and that this pair group relationship is so much interested them that they just begin to love that period. Then sometimes they quarrel with their parents also over some issues, and they sometimes they become much more depressed, and sometimes they are so much jolly. So emotionally they become so much attached with something, or emotional feelings becomes vibrant at that time. That is known as emotional development. Next one is moral and religious development. Morally they become conscious. They begin to think morally at that time. Logical thinking, moral thinking develops. Religious practices also becomes to develop at that time. Okay, they become interested in some religious practices at that time. So these types of development which take place in the life of an adolescent, and that psychology that goes through, this study of that psychology is known as adolescent psychology. Much more to understand here also, that adolescent thinking is affected by egocentrism. Okay, now what is egocentrism? And egocentrism means that he is involved with himself only. Okay, his body structure, his action, his interest. Okay, and because of that thing, three things can be explained here. The egocentrism is characterized by self-absorption. Their focus is on themselves. They begin to love themselves. They begin to become stylish. Their hairstyle, their dressing style becomes vibrant at that time. Okay, because they develop their sense of loving themselves. Next one is personal fable. They see themselves as unique and special. Okay, as they love themselves, they become unique and special. Then imaginary audience. They think others are focused on them. They think that others are focusing on them, and that's why they become much more self-conscious about themselves. Now, all these periods are critical time, confused time. Their mind, their body structure all develops, suddenly changes, and because of that thing, Stanley Hall has described the life of adolescent, okay, as a period of stress and strain, storm and strife. So all these words signifies what? That their life goes through a blow of wind, okay, and which comes like that, just as the wind is blowing in a heavy way, and then their feeling, the respiration, everything suddenly changes. So when we study all this characterization of the adolescence period, this feeling, this characteristics of an adolescent period is known as that adolescent psychology. I hope students you can understand it better now. Okay.